you so much for coming here, West Empower in our Educational Community Civic Series. I know that your schedule is extremely busy, so I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out to come and join us and educate us at our Educational Community Civic Series. Can you hear me?
It's more than a pleasure, and I would always take time out. Yes, and I'm more than happy to be here, and thank you very much for the gracious invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And I want to let everyone know, we're sorry that we're a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties, but within that time, we are ready to get started and move on with our Educational Community Civic Series. And Mik, if you don't have any more questions, before we get started, we can go ahead and get started now. Let's
do it.
All right. All right. So, of course, I know you personally. Of course, we talk, we have been knowing each other for several years, but for anyone that may not know you, can you tell us, who are you?
Sure. Well, my name is Mik Pappas. I'm a district judge in the east end of the city of Pittsburgh, which means I'm a magistrate. I've been doing that since 2017 when I was first elected. Before that, I was an innocence defense and civil rights attorney. I had a multidisciplinary practice, but that was most of what I did, innocence defense and civil rights. Before that, I worked in state government with the state Senate. And before that, I was a community organizer for about 10 years. And for all of that time, I've been doing one thing, which is, protecting people's rights from unfair systems and powerful interests that threaten them on a day-to-day basis. And that's what I continue to do as a judge. Even before, of course, I had a career. I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh. I grew up in the East Liberty neighborhood back when it was not so full of Whole Foods and Home Depot. It was a much different place back then. Very much impacted by the war on drugs, very much impacted by disinvestment in our urban neighborhoods. And so that influenced me a lot, kind of growing up in that environment, influenced a lot by the faith community in that neighborhood. And just kind of always gave me a deep determination and commitment to helping my neighbors.
Yeah. And so I wanted to comment on you because you brought up, your commitment with community service in the community. And so, Mik, I want to ask you, with your passion of, your magistrate right now, can you educate us and tell us a little bit more of, how would you take that into the bench?
So I didn't mention, and I wasn't sure if we were going to get into the current Common Pleas race, but I am also a candidate for the Court of Common Pleas. Currently, I'm a district judge, and that means I represent 8 neighborhoods in the east end of the city of Pittsburgh, neighborhoods as different as Highland Park to Stanton Heights to East Liberty to Garfield and Bloomfield. So all different neighborhoods, really representing kind of Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh in general. But since I've become a district judge, I think that what I could say is that I've served with distinction, because I've been able to do some things that other folks didn't think would be possible. I've been able to reduce the eviction rate by 40% by allowing my court to be a place where restorative justice has a forum. Allowing folks to help resolve their differences and not always go first thing to the most harsh remedy, which is an eviction. So mostly getting folks to work together. I've been able to eliminate my reliance on cash bail as a district judge. Very important job of a district judge is to be the first court that a person appears before when they get arrested in a preliminary arraignment. And one of the jobs of the judge there is to set bail.
Sorry, that's my queenie. Sorry.
Happens to me all day in court when we're remote. That's okay. I've had more pets in the courtroom than ever before since we went remote.
I'm so sorry. Sorry about that.
No problem. Like I was saying, I was able to eliminate my reliance on cash bail, and that's by just giving individual attention to the circumstances of each person in every single case, making a point to try to really understand what their circumstances are and what type of bail conditions would be appropriate for them. As you know, Terry, because we worked closely together on this as a district judge, we've been able to work together and develop innovative approaches to dealing with court debt, fines and fees. In our district court, we're 1 out of 46 district courts in Allegheny County. And we have over $650,000 in court debt that's outstanding dating back to the 90s. And the question becomes, how do you help folks deal with this court debt if they're already impoverished, if they already would require a public defender, if they already have one source of income, and that's Social Security?
Yeah.
And what all of these approaches require, what all these approaches really need, is somebody who, one, has fairness in their heart, right? Two, has deep knowledge of the law, and three, wants to take an innovative approach to how we do things in the court. And of course, four, to have strong community partners like yourself and so many others that have helped us along the way. And so, we were able to develop this fine and fee workshop, working together, working with our national and local partners. And in one day, we held some 30 hearings on people who had outstanding court debt, and we were able to convert over $5,000 into community service just in that one day. We were able to connect folks with counselors in terms of finances, and just all types of community resources, so that people knew that they were coming to court not to be tricked into going to jail for not paying money, but because we were really trying to genuinely help them deal with the court debt and whatever the situation was they had going on. So kind of restoring trust in our courts, taking a different approach, understanding that we have a long history that leads people to not trust what's going on in court, and we have an affirmative obligation to deal with that up front. Now, as a common pleas judge, what you have the opportunity to do is take all those things that I just talked about, all those things we just discussed, and do them on a much larger scale, right?
Yeah.
When I'm presiding in an eviction case, it's from one of 8 neighborhoods. At that level, it's going to be from anywhere in Allegheny County. We're going from 30,000 people to 1.2 million. When we're talking about bail decisions, we also start bringing sentencing decisions into the equation. We start dealing with family matters in the juvenile division and family courts. How do we save money by coming up with solutions that make sense and keep families together? Right? This happens at the family court level. Even in orphans court, you have folks who are dealing with the passing of a loved one with not real much of a sense of how to navigate the estate process. You're dealing with folks, kids in foster care, kids trying to find good families for adoption. And so you're making all these really important decisions that affect people all over the county. But the thing with common pleas, and what really makes it so different than a district court, is that at the common pleas level, you really have an opportunity to help set policy for our entire judicial district. And it's not just about the decisions you make. It's about what is going to be our approach in general as a judicial district, as a court system for all of Allegheny County. What are our agencies like pretrial services, like adult probation? How are they going to operate? What are they going to look like? 2 seats on the jail oversight board are reserved for common pleas judges. And so all of these kind of, and there's more examples to provide, but at the common pleas level, you're really much more involved in shaping our local judiciary, more so than you would be at a district court level. And I think that I'm in a wonderful position to add some perspective to what's already there at the bench, serving honorably.
Yeah. You have mentioned, several powerful points that I want to elaborate on, but I want to go back to, at the very beginning, you wanted to make sure that everyone knew, that everyone listening knew that you are running for the Court of Common Pleas. And I think maybe because when we talk, we just start talking about everything when it's just you and I did not say, hey, I'm inviting you to, talk about the importance of the Court of Common Pleas and, the situation that we are in right now, this unique situation that we are in with these, 9 seats. We have an opportunity right now to make history. So, and I'm sorry, because once you and I start talking, we talk about so many different things. So thank you so much. And I wanted you tapped in about, how you started looking at eviction rates and cash bail. And so can you elaborate with that? Because that started with you several years ago, And can you, because and why I want you to elaborate on that is because I want our listeners to understand the type of people that we have a chance to set into office, people that can, make a decision at a drop of a dime of what needs to be done, not being comfortable with the same old that's not working. That's right. Someone that can take something and say, this is not right. Let's change this. So Mik, can you share with us, what were you seeing that made you say, I'm going to take it upon myself, or even partner with, some of your colleagues to look at these eviction rates in the cash bail, how it was not working, and alternatives that you in your courtroom as a magistrate was given instead of prison sentences.
Right. Yeah. And I would just say that this year is an incredibly important election because there are 9 vacancies in our Court of Common Pleas. That represents almost a quarter of the judges in that court. And so when I was talking about how common pleas judges set policy, one thing they do is they serve on what's called a board of judges. Mm-hmm. And they, by a majority vote, decide whether or not to change our local rules of procedure, for example. Mm-hmm. And they vote for who's going to be our president judge and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so if you elect a full quarter of that body all in one year, mm-hmm. you have essentially an entire voting block within that board of judges. Yeah. So it's an incredible opportunity. And let me just say this. I mean, if we always talk about, presidential elections and mm-hmm. congressional elections mm-hmm. and the mayor and these really important positions that get a lot of attention. Yeah. But anybody, whoever has been or has a family member who has been in front of a judge mm-hmm. knows how darn important it is to have the person in that seat who sees you, who understands you, who wants to understand the complexities of your experience mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. and who's not looking past you or seeing you as a docket number or something like that. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And personally, and I've been open about this during my campaign because I want people to know who's running to represent them. Mm-hmm. My family has had to deal with recovering from the traumas of domestic abuse. Yeah. I grew up with an incarcerated parent. Mm-hmm. I have loved ones who died from gun violence and addiction. Yeah. And so I want I'm open about this because I want people to know that when they elect Judge Mik Pappas to Court of Common Pleas, they're finally going to get a judge who really gets them. Mm-hmm. And they can have confidence in our courts because they know that people who can identify with them and some things that they may have gone through are up there on the bench. Yeah. And are a voice in the room for other judges who haven't been through those kinds of things, right? A voice in the room when those conversations are being held. And so when I look at something like cash bail, first of all, as an attorney, I look at cash bail and I say, if the purpose of bail, first of all, bail, everybody has a fundamental right to it. Yeah. And the reason that you have a fundamental right to pretrial release, and when I say fundamental right, it's the most important kind of right that is reserved under our Constitution. Mm-hmm. It's the highest level of a right that a person could have. And if a person has a fundamental right to bail, there's essentially 2 important reasons for that. One, it preserves the pillar of our democracy, which is the presumption of innocence. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is, you are accused of something. You go through a process to determine guilt or innocence, and at that mm-hmm. time, you're innocent. And you have to be presumed innocent in the eyes of the law. But where we incarcerate someone unnecessarily, it infects that presumption. Mm-hmm. It corrodes it. The other important guarantee that supports the fundamental right for pretrial release is your right to choose your counsel and participate in your defense. Mm-hmm. Being incarcerated significantly inhibits a person to participate in their own defense, in the planning and the preparation of their defense in their case. And so these are just 2 of the important guarantees that inform the law as to why pretrial release is a fundamental right, just as a backdrop, right? Mm-hmm. And then we get into, well, what is cash bail? Cash mm-hmm. bail is a condition placed upon someone that in exchange for their release pre-trial, that 80% of the people who are there pre-trial don't have any of.
Yeah.
Right. And so the law does allow a judge to deny bail in very narrow circumstances where there's no other option available that will ensure the safe release of the person, that they'll come to court, but most importantly, the safe release of the person.
Yeah.
Right. If there's no other option, then the court has discretion to deny bail. And what I saw happening, what I thought was problematic, is that if you impose cash bail on someone who doesn't have the means to pay it, then you're effectively denying bail by another name. That was my concern.
Yeah.
And did you really go through the analysis of what other conditions might be available to serve those limited purposes of public safety and making sure a person comes to court, but most importantly, public safety? So if you eliminate from the equation 80% of people who can't pay anything because they qualify for a public defender, so legally this is arguable, but in my view, they can't pay anything in exchange for their release, then that's a large part of folks that you're not even really thinking about cash bail for them. And then you're looking at a small percentage of people who do present that much risk to the community. Now, in that small percentage of people, does cash bail make sense? Does them paying money make them less dangerous upon their release? I don't think so. And in fact, recent history, ancient history is rife with examples, locally and otherwise, of folks who have paid their cash bail and gone out and committed terrible, heinous, violent crimes. And so I think what the answer to do in that situation is to deny bail or come up with some other condition that will kind of remove whatever is causing the risk with that person. Right. And so it's really kind of a legal analysis that I've developed, but part of it here is having options, right? Because you hear that I talk about options for bail. Options is important. This goes into bail. This goes into any type of reentry situation. Anybody who's ever had to reenter the community from a term of incarceration, however so short, understands that you have to have support, not supervision. You have to have supports that are tailored to your specific circumstances. For some folks, it's family. For some folks, it's having a good counselor. For some folks, it's housing. For some folks, it's a combination of those things. But to release someone after a term of incarceration, all the trauma that's inherent in that, and to say you're being supervised and nothing more, it's not working, and it hasn't been working for a long time. And so we need to be thinking about all of the alternatives that we can come up with at the community level, not just on the front end at the bail side, but at the back end on the probation side, upon release from incarceration side, and all of those, and just establish a more nurturing and understanding system.
And so you said some amazing things, because first of all, I wanted to make sure that our listeners knew that this isn't something that just started. That's number one. In your courtroom, that's number one. Number two is any magistrate or anyone can know that something is not right and still not step up to the plate to fix it, or you can stay comfortable and just let it go the way that it's going. You know what I'm saying? But I want everyone to understand that, like you said, this is a time that quarter of the seats are here right now that is up, and to look at individuals that is not afraid to step up and say, this is not right, and this is what we're going to do about it. Which I want to be honest, a lot of people can literally be extremely comfortable and say that takes too much work. This is working the way that it is. So I want to thank you for your answer, because that helps us, look deeper into the role of a magistrate, the bail, a cash bail, evictions, addiction, and going to the bench. So court of common pleas bench. So thank you so much for that. Now, Mik, So I have, of course, I know, you know, a lot of your passions, a lot of your visions of how, but I read that you said that you have a next generation vision for equitable justice. Now, can you educate us on, you know, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. And obviously when I'm talking about next generation, I'm not talking about in terms of age. I'm just talking about changing the status quo in terms of our expectations, right? I'm talking about electing judges, not just based on the numbers that they're able to, you know, make part of a talking point or in their campaign speech. I'm not talking about numbers. I'm talking about whether or not someone has fairness in their hearts. And the only way you can see that is by their actions, by their deeds. We saw last year a reckoning unlike anything we've seen in recent memory, right? Surrounding the death of George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd. And when that happened, I immediately knew that we as judges had to do something. But to be quite honest with you, I had some trepidation. I had some hesitation because as judges, we're not supposed to weigh in on controversial issues. And when we do, we have to do it in a certain way, you know, that doesn't create any appearance of bias. And this is important. People have to know that judges are not operating out of political motives, that they're operating for the purpose of promoting confidence in the courts. And that's when I ultimately decided to issue a statement in response. I hesitated at first, but then I saw that judicial districts all over the country and judges all over the country began issuing statements about what occurred and the community's response. And I read an article from a prominent former judge saying that, you know what, judges had an ethical obligation to speak out. So I was concerned about the ethical implications of speaking out. But he was turning that whole presumption on its head. He was saying, no, judges have an ethical obligation to speak out whenever there is this much mistrust expressed in such a, by way of an uprising centered around our justice system. So what I did was I issued a statement in response to the killing of George Floyd. And I'm the only judge in Pennsylvania who did that. Because
thank you, because I wanted to ask, that was my question, who joined you, you know, what other judges joined you, but thank you so much. Go ahead. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Well, no, that's okay. I issued the statement and I did some research and I wanted to see what other courts were saying. I wanted to see how we could make sure that we were speaking in terms of the law, in terms of the judicial system, and the fundamental priority of making it more fair, more equitable, and ensuring that implicit bias doesn't make its way into our assumptions and our decisions. Ensuring that folks are held accountable when they express hateful views within the courts, and that we're being mindful all the time that we've got a long way to go because we're coming from a long history. And what we need now is judges who are willing to lead us from an era of reckoning into an era of reconciliation. And I strongly believe that that's what this election presents us with, is an opportunity to find those judicial leaders, judges who are willing to step up and lead from the bench. And there is a way to do that. There is a way to do that as a judge. In fact, our own president judge, Judge Clark, who has been a great leader for us locally, she reached out to me after I issued the statement. And we had a conversation. And what grew out of that was a racial equity working group for the 5th Judicial District. And so we're working with judges, we're working with court staff, court-related agencies, and we're really in the very early stages of the process. But we're trying to get comfortable with having really hard conversations about race with each other, and then hopefully very soon with the broader community. So, you know, you plant a seed and it grows. You know, if you nurture it and you let it do what it has to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mik. And you know, Judge Clark she's such an amazing, I hear so many amazing, things about Judge Clark. I have been in her presence, don't know her, personally. I know of her, but what I can say is that she's always making a power move, or building someone else up. That's all I ever hear. So thank you so much for that. And also explaining to us, exactly what you meant when the next generation vision, for bringing us to your vision. Thank you so much for that, Mik. Now we talked a little bit about, you and I, we sit on a committee, and I want to make sure that we are understanding, or we are educated about, we sit on a fines and fees committee, but can you tell us, is this something that the fines and fees, is that something that can only get fixed through through the level of a magistrate level, or is that something that
That's a good question. That's a great question.
Or is
that's a wonderful question. So no, I mean, really, because we did this workshop here that I talked about earlier about fines and fees. The fines and fees that a person incurs in a court case at the common pleas level are exponentially greater.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and the implications of one not paying their fines and fees at that level, for example, when they're on probation and things, are exponentially more serious in terms of risk of loss of liberty and otherwise. And so to develop something similar at that level has the potential to be game changing. And in fact, when we did that, speaking of Judge Clark, when we did that workshop, I asked if she would issue an order allowing me to, from my district court office, hear court debt cases, what we call payment determination hearings, from anywhere in the city, from anywhere out of Pittsburgh Municipal Court. And she granted that request, quite graciously. And so we were able to hear, for example, when someone gets a traffic ticket in the city of Pittsburgh, it wouldn't come to a district court in the city of Pittsburgh, because all of our traffic cases are held in Pittsburgh Municipal Court.
Yeah.
Right. Also, many types of summary cases are held in Pittsburgh Municipal Court. And so if someone's fines and fees that were outstanding were still at the district court level, they would be in one of our district courts here in the city, or they would be in Pittsburgh Municipal Court, especially traffic cases, which is a really big deal because that involves loss of license and things like that. If you don't pay your traffic fines or you don't respond to a traffic case, then they suspend your license, which is a major, barrier to employment for folks coming out or otherwise. And so, Judge Clark issued that order allowing me to hear cases from Pittsburgh Municipal Court and also from the jurisdiction I represent, which was a tremendous opportunity for us to say, hey, this is a model that could expand. It could go countywide. Now, at the common pleas level, you have countywide jurisdiction already. You don't have jurisdiction over district judges unless you have a petition before you about a decision in a district court case. But there's still the potential. There's still the way to make room for it. And especially having somebody who's been through the district court experience, who's been a district court judge, who has developed a relationship with all of my colleagues, who I admire and respect very much. And then to take that to the common pleas level, it just really kind of builds on, what's been happening since the day one, right? It builds on it. It's just to keep building, to keep following that path.
Yeah, because and I want to take from the tickets, traffic tickets, but also, to take it a step further, our men and women that, how can the court of common pleas judge make a impact on a man or a woman who, may have 5 years, 10 years, 16 years, come home and you still may have, $40, $50, $60, $70,000 worth of fees and fines. This, like you said, this is a game changer of where we are on so many levels with these 9 seats, with this court of common pleas race. This is game changing, so I'm so glad.
And let me just say, it's unreasonable. It's not reasonable to expect someone to come home and to have the huge barrier of employment of a felony conviction and then all of a sudden be ready to start paying off that court debt. All of a sudden be ready to pay off child support that's accrued over all that time. All of a sudden be able to pay off student loans that have accrued, that have the interest never stopped while you were incarcerated all that time. We are setting people up for failure, and we're setting our community up for safety risks and problems in that regard. If we're not working with community partners through the courts to deal with that issue, right? So one thing that I think is that we as judicial district really need to focus on economic justice initiatives for people who are recently released or court involved at all. And this can take any variety of forms, but we have to be involved in those discussions with the trades, with folks, anyone from employment training agencies like Partner for Work and Goodwill, any number that you've heard of. I mean, especially these days after the reckoning of last year, so many organizations and stakeholders are starting to see that having a relationship with the courts is not just possible, but it must happen.
Yes.
Right. It's not something that we can do. It's something that we have to do. And they're just all so eager to get involved. And we need to just be able to greet them from the courts with open arms, have honest discussions about what we can and can't do, because we can't expect the courts to be a be all end all for everything. But it is a powerful institution. It is a third branch of government. It is right here in the community all day, every day, hearing thousands and thousands of cases a year with tremendous opportunity to reach people. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mik. Thank you so much for that. Because it's extremely important, so thank you so much for that. Now, what would you say, because I mean, in all reality, there are many people, and I'm not going to say many people but there are some people that believe that, right now, the court of common pleas is, it may be none of their business, or, this has nothing to do with them, or, may not even be interested in what's going on right now. If you had a chance to, say to a community person or persons about the importance of what's going on right now, what would you say?
I would say that every single person, whether you think so or not, is affected by what happens in our courts every day. And don't let it be a situation where it's finally you in the court before you realize that. Right? Before you realize that how that person's treated in that court, what transpires in that court, how effective the remedies are, it's going to impact everybody, no matter what. And just look at what happened last year with the reckoning and uprising. There's not one person who wasn't affected by that. Right. We can no longer live in these silos where we assume that what happens to one person doesn't impact me. Because it does. Right. And I would say to anyone who thinks that what happens in court doesn't impact them because they're not the one in court, it's a tough question to answer, because there's so many different people out there, and you want to make sure that you have an experience that resonates with all of them. But tell me one person who doesn't know someone who's been affected by addiction. Tell me one person who doesn't know someone who's been affected by domestic violence. I don't think there's anybody out there who hasn't themselves or doesn't know somebody who's been impacted by those things. And whether or not somebody was healed or harmed further is going to be largely a matter of what happens in the courts.
Thank you. Thank you so much, because you couldn't have said it better, because, here at Western Power, we like to, make sure that the community know, the courts affect the person, affect people, affect families, affect the community. So that's the extreme importance of this as well. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. Now, can the courts, the magistrates, and and the court of common plea judges, can you see something of them working together, or how could they work together to implement something to tackle or dismantle our prison to school pipeline?
Hmm. That's a really good question. So you know, of course, about the Gwen's Girls
Yes.
recent report,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
it showed that you know, African American girls in Allegheny County, more so than any other group, are ending up in the juvenile justice system from school referrals.
Mhm.
And I would just briefly summarize it like that.
Mhm.
And it's you know, times 10, right?
Yeah.
That's how much it's happening. I don't have the report in front of me, but it was a really impactful report, and it made everybody in the community kind of open their eyes to say, "What?"
Yes.
You
Mhm.
know, because maybe that's not their experience, but when they hear those numbers, when they see those words, they're shocked, right?
Mhm.
And so I don't want to get too into the weeds about how exactly, but there are instances where district judges, magistrates refer cases to common pleas. For example, in truancy cases, a district judge will have the discretion of whether or not to refer certain cases to common pleas.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
Mhm.
if a student is charged with disorderly conduct or harassment, something that's under the crimes code, let's say the district judge finds that student, finds them guilty and fines them, or imposes some other penalty. If the student doesn't satisfy that penalty, the law says that the judge is required to, has no discretion but to refer it to common pleas.
Yeah.
And so one way that common pleas could work with district judges to avoid those referrals, maybe sometimes those referrals are appropriate.
Mhm.
Maybe sometimes it was something that was charged as a harassment or disorderly conduct, but was really borderline criminal behavior and maybe should be in the juvenile court in the first place. But most of the time, that's not the case. And so what common pleas judges could do is work with district judges to develop alternatives to fines, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
alternatives to adjudication in the first place. One thing that I've done as a district judge is I've reached out to community-based organizations
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
develop a more robust pool of uh, county court approved alternative adjudication sites. So, in other words, um, the law allows a summary case to be referred to a community agency that's approved by the courts.
Mhm.
And upon completion of some program that's appropriate for that person, the judge would have to dismiss the case. The problem was that when I came in, we didn't have a single one of those sites approved for the district that I represent. So it wasn't really a focused initiative to have more of these sites in place. And so
Yeah.
I started reaching out to community partners. And so far, I think we've gotten 10 or so sites approved,
Mhm.
both in my
Mhm.
district and otherwise. And so I just have kind of a whole palette, if you will, of options to choose from for
Wow.
referring
Wow.
people depending on what their circumstances are. One
Yeah.
Hood was recently approved as an alternative adjudication site. Community Kitchen Pittsburgh was recently approved as an alternative adjudication site. In our workshop,
Mhm.
we had Bloomfield Garfield Corporation. They're doing a horticulture engineering, horticulture and uh, uh, training program
Mhm.
that they got approved. And they actually received some significant foundation contributions as part of the fact that they were working with the courts to put on their new program,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So everybody's kind of paying attention to this, and the question is like, how can we
Yeah.
kind of, you know, plant all these seeds all over the place that are going to
Mhm.
grow into being
Mhm.
supports in the community for our courts.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that. Because and I'm also glad that I'm first of all, I'm glad that it's on everyone's radar about our prison to school pipeline. And I also it wasn't one of my questions, but I want to ask you, because you sit on several boards in our communities. Like you sit on One Hood Media. You mentioned Garfield Bloomfield. You do a lot of work in the community, or I should not say, or volunteer work in the community. Mik, what would that look like? If you were to move forward onto the bench.
Yeah, I would have to probably look at each of my community-based activities and see which ones I can continue to do, which ones I couldn't.
Mhm.
I would definitely want to continue to be a member of One Hood. It's been one of my greatest honors to be invited into a Black-led organization like
Yeah,
One Hood. It
yeah.
just is such a trend-setting national organization here in Pittsburgh. So that's been a tremendous honor for me, and I'd love to be able to keep doing that. But I would have to look at all of the various roles that I have and see which ones make sense, which ones don't, and then just basically, see what would be next. because it's a different role. It is a different role.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna tell you, when I I know you sit on the board. So one of my first thoughts was of One Hood Media. You sit on the board. Now, one of my first thoughts was, does he have to leave, or would you still be able? So I'm glad that you answered that and cleared that up with us as well. Thank you so much for that. My next question is, so you told us a lot about yourself, Mik. You know a lot of, and of course, I know a lot, about you and vice versa. Can you share something with us that a lot of people do not know? That only maybe your few intimate family members or friends that you are proud of, but you just don't brag about it?
Yeah, probably the thing that I haven't talked about at all yet, but I'm the most proud of, is the fact that I'm a dad. I've got a 3-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, and my wife and we all live in Highland Park together. And, I was recently asked, what is something that you've done not career related that you're most proud of? And I can't think of anything else. And I know it sounds like a line, but no, I know it sounds like, kind of corny and whatnot, but it's the only thing I could think of, because it's the only thing that matters to me, and it matters to me the most, to be quite honest. And I guess part of it is that I came from a disjointed immediate family.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And single parent household, and my stepfather did come through, but, it was some tough times. And when you come from that kind of background, I should mention that I always had a lot of extended family, right? A lot of, folks from the neighborhood, friends you grow up with, their families that all welcome you. And that always, helped me find a way as well, and always was supportive. But I never really thought about having, it never really occurred to me that I would have my own family.
Yeah.
Until it happened. And then you're like, this is awesome.
Yeah. And listen, that is something to be proud of. That is something extremely, to be called a dad and a husband. Yes, yeah. That is something extremely something to be proud of.
So I know it sounds corny, but but that's just it's the way I feel about the situation. In my free time, I exercise. I like reading biographies. One I read recently was there's a law professor here from here in Pittsburgh. I don't think he's at Pitt Law anymore, but he's a famous biographer, David Garrow. He wrote Bearing the Cross, which was a very well-known biography about Dr. King. And he wrote a biography about Barack Obama called Rising Star. And I recently read Rising Star, and it's a phenomenal book, because it just really details not just President Obama's life, but the history surrounding him as he was growing up. We know that after he went to college, he graduated and moved to New York. Or I'm sorry, not to New York, from New York to Chicago to become a community organizer. But what I didn't realize is how the environment in which he was an organizer was so much like what was happening in Pittsburgh at the time.
Yeah,
he was organizing faith-based institutions, churches, leadership within the clergy there, to push back against the deindustrialization of Chicago's South Side, to push back against all of the steel mills leaving Chicago at the time. That was a big part of what he was doing before he then went off and went to law school. And that very much speaks to my own experience, because of course I was much younger. I was 3 years old at the time, but the church that I went to growing up, which was East Liberty Lutheran, was very much kind of one of those churches that Barack Obama would have been organizing in Pittsburgh. The pastor got arrested for a protest at a steel mill kind of thing.
Yeah.
One of my earliest memories is being outside of what is now the Family Law Building, but used to be Allegheny County Jail.
Yeah.
Attending a protest for a pastor who got incarcerated for protesting the steel mills.
Okay.
So that's something probably a lot of people don't know about me, but it was just amazing to read his history, and then to see how much what was happening in Chicago mirrored what was happening in Pittsburgh at the time.
Yeah.
And just to kind of sit with that experience and see what it means to you, right? That's
Yeah.
what I like about reading biographies. It shows you like this important person, and then it kind of makes you think about your own life in certain ways.
Okay. See, you share something else with us. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Now, my next question to you is, I have three more questions. Okay, for the Court of Common Pleas, the judge, this bench, this seat, why you?
That's a very good question. I think everybody should ask that about every single candidate they push the button for. No more of this tic-tac-toe, meeny, miny, mo. I'm going to pick this person for judge because I like the last, spelling of the last name.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it gets back to what I said earlier. We talk a lot about numbers when we talk about common pleas candidates. How many hours in the courtroom? How many cases did you do? How long you've been a lawyer? This and that. How long you lived in Pittsburgh? And we could talk about numbers with respect to me, right? I've presided over 900 landlord-tenant cases. I've argued X number of cases here. I've presided over 1,000 bail cases. We can always talk about numbers, but what matters most is what's in a person's heart. Do they have fairness in their heart? Are they going to see those people that are appearing before them and seek to understand the complexities of their lived experience? And like I said before, vote Mik Pappas for common pleas, because you're finally going to get a judge who gets you and who's going to want to get you and understand your situation and what's going on. Have to be faithful to the law. This is not a reason to not do that, right? Have to be fair and disinterested. Have to not have an appearance of bias. Of course, that's a minimum expectation from a judge. But what we really need now in these days is judges who are going to pay attention to each individual case and understand how serious implications it has for not just the person standing there in front of you, but so many other people, an entire community, an entire world that's looking at our justice system, demanding that we start to be an example instead of an embarrassment, to be quite honest with you.
Wow.
So I'm asking folks to vote Mik Pappas for common pleas, because this is the vision that I brought to the district court bench. And this is the vision that I'm asking the voters to choose me to take countywide.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Mik, because, and I'm glad that you said that should be a question that we should be asking, and doing our research and why this particular person. So thank you so much for that. Now, before we, couple more questions, I promise. But so there may be people listening, or there may be someone. I know a lot of people, a couple of my friends, they work late. So when they come in, they may look at the recording late in the morning, late at night. So, and they may have a question for you that I did not ask, or they may want to elaborate on something that you and I discussed, or they may want to even volunteer. How can someone get in touch with you?
Sure. We're on social media at Mik Pappas on Facebook and Twitter, at Friends of Mik Pappas on Instagram, and our website is www.mikpappas.com.
Okay.
MikPappas.com. And you can email me personally at mik@mikpappas.com. And you can also email our general mailbox at hello@mikpappas.com. One of the terrible things about running for office is you have to say your own name over and over again. And so it gets kind of uncomfortable after a while, but it's all of the Mik Pappases at and .coms.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Now, before we wrap it up this evening or this afternoon, Mik, is there anything that you would like to say before we wrap it up?
I would. And once again, thank you so much, Terri, for hosting this forum and for inviting me to do it. Your reputation as a leader in the community, as someone who fights for folks who need a voice and aren't able to be their own voice all the time, is just, it speaks for itself. And I thank you so much for inviting me here today. All I really want to say is this. Don't get caught slipping. This common pleas race is extremely important, and you have to make your voice heard and known by voting. It's no longer an excuse to not vote. and be informed on these common pleas races, on these judicial races, because these judges, we judges, interface with more folks on a regular basis than any other elected official on a one-on-one level, right? You have to know who we are and what we're about before you push that button. So please do your research, understand the implications of this race, and come out and vote. Vote early by mail starting March 29th. Vote in person on May 18th. And if you want to get involved, we can't win without, if you like some of what you've heard today, if you think I might be a good candidate for this race, and I hope you do, please contact us, sign up to volunteer. We don't win without folks in the community helping us spread the word. So we need volunteers to do everything from knock on doors to help us plan on election day, to be at the polls, and everything in between. This is a campaign that we need to bring to the people. We're not expecting the people to just come to us. Okay. And so visit mikpappas.com, all the Facebook and the Twitter, and see if you like it. Of course, follow Miss Terri over here at West End Power. And I really appreciate the time here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mik. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Judge Mik Pappas running for Court of Common Pleas judge. He left his information that if you have any questions, or you would like to even elaborate more on what we were discussing, or if you would like to volunteer or just say hello, please reach out to Mik Pappas. And with that, we're going to say good night and thank you so much, Mik, for your time.
Thank you.